Welcome to the Hamumu Halloween Home Horror Hoedown, the podcast where we watch scary movies so you don't have to.
From award-winning to completely unknown, we take them all way too seriously.
I'm your host, Mike Hummel.
And I'm your host, Solange Hummel.
Now, warning, we use a ghoulish number of spoilers, so watch the movies first.
Second warning, we don't know anything about anything, so don't take us seriously as we take these movies seriously.
Hey, Soli.
Yes. Are you holding your breath?
2024!
So hold your breath 2024. This is an environmental disaster movie, right? Kind of, mostly?
I mean, I don't think that's the crux of the plot. I mean, there is an environmental disaster going on, but it's not about that. It's about Crazy Town, which is what our house is.
Okay, but isn't the Crazy Town directly the result of them living in this environmental disaster?
It's possible, but we don't know that. Maybe she just got Crazy Town.
I mean, okay, maybe. But also her sister, her whatever sister-in-law, I don't remember what the connection was, but all of the women were going a little something.
Well, yeah. Okay, so the situation is it's the 30s in Oklahoma. It's the Dust Bowl, clearly, because they're eating nothing but dust. And of course, everybody's going a little stir crazy and nuts because they can't go outside. There's no food. There's no water. Everybody's dying. It's terrible.
Yes. And a lot of the men of the town, which is very small, there's like, if there were 20 people there total, I would be surprised.
I liked how whenever they showed a house, it was just that house and miles of sand around it. And then like later they'll be at another house. I'm like, wow, can they see these other houses? Is he just walking for hundreds of miles and coming across one other building?
I mean, I think they were miles apart. And I think
privacy.
Generally you would, take your horse and buggy, or the sheriff had a car.
Yeah, that was pretty nice.
But I think most people at this point definitely didn't have a car, and most of them didn't have a horse left. Yeah. Esther had a horse, but I think everyone had lost so much that what used to be a very accessible neighbor who was a few miles away is no longer accessible. Well, it was. They walked everywhere.
Yeah, they got there. It's just, it was weird how every time a building was shown, that was the only building in shot. It was interesting.
Yeah. I mean, it definitely, and we never saw a town. That's the thing. They went to a dance. There is a town. They get the mail. There's a crossroads where the post office / convenience store, right? There's a place where there's a couple buildings all in the same place, and we never saw that place.
No.
They were very much, they were very focused on the isolation of this area.
Yes, I thought it was interesting. It's like an unlivable world. It looked like Mars, and it was like Mars. They had their little habitats on Mars, and they could spacewalk to the other habitats. But between the spaces, there's nothing. It's just dead and dry, and it's just it feels isolated, like you say, and just there's nothing there for humans.
No. I think I don't know. I mean, this is a time period that really happened, and these were real. This is a real situation, which I think is what I kept thinking about while we watched this movie, is that there are people in the world who lived through this exact situation. Now, maybe this, the angles of the shots to make the houses look completely alone, so you can't see that you can actually see the neighbor's house if you look in the other direction. But I think the reality of the time was such that you probably did feel that isolated, because even though they got together for their little sewing circle and, occasionally they would go visit the cousins and aunt, and like there was interaction. They had the dance and whatever, but when you think about how, that sewing circle was maybe the one thing that they did with other people in the entire week.
Yeah.
And otherwise, they were at home. And the wild thing to me is that they were at home with essentially nothing to do.
Yeah, they did not have fields to take care of.
No, like, she talks about when they first got there and their field took off and they probably had a bunch of animals and like there were a lot of chores to do. And now the only chores they have to do are sweeping the floors and, shaking the dust out of everything and wiping off all the surfaces. Right. Which is this constant thing, which is why I think, all of that put together, then there's nothing to hold on to. Like she was losing her mind because there was nothing for her to do but think about all of the terrible things she had gone through, including the death of her daughter. Again, that was because of scarlet fever.
Yeah.
But I suspect more likely to die because of their isolation and because of the things that were going on around them and the dryness of the air and, who knows what all.
Yes, she was very haunted by the death of one of her children. She's got 2 more to go, one of which is not dead, but deaf from the same scarlet fever.
Mm-hmm.
And we find out that in the aftermath of Ada's death, her daughter who died of scarlet fever, she stopped sleeping and went crazy back then. And it was in some way abusive to them. It's never explained, but she has them lock themselves in their room at night so she can't get to them. Apparently she does things while sleepwalking.
Right. I don't think she was intentionally abusive to them. I think that she would sleepwalk, and in her nightmares, she would do things like later in the movie when she starts having her sleepwalking nightmares again because she stops taking her medicine, because she's trying to stay awake. It's a sleep aid, and she's trying to stay awake so that she can protect them from the grifter who's come to town. Grifter.
I mean,
he's grifting them.
I guess. That's fair.
The grifting drifter. The grifter drifter.
He's grifting a little.
I mean, he's a murderous grifter drifter. I say grifter because he comes in and he's like, I lay
Bitcoin.
I lay hands. I can heal your daughter. Right. I can heal your cow. I can bring the rain. Like he's grifting them. He's trying to get things from them by lying.
You've called out some pretty solid grifts there.
Yeah. But then she finds out that he was lying, that her husband did not send him, that he is a murderer. And so like she wants to make sure that he can't get in the house and kill her children. But that makes her stop taking her medication, which then makes her the danger that's in the house to her children.
Yes, because as we all know, if you breathe in the gray man who's made of dust, he makes you do awful things. And what I find with this movie is that that's a story we're given early on because for some reason her kids are reading a book of short horror stories, which feels anachronistic to me, but what do I know?
Okay, does it? Because like Grimm's fairy tales?
Well, yeah, sure. But it just felt very much like scary stories to tell in the dark. Like it wasn't what I would expect a book to be. But I mean, 1930, that's back when it's not as long ago as you think. That's when they had horror comics and stuff. So maybe it's totally chill.
It is weird that that's like the only book they have to read is this like creepy horror story book.
But we're presented with the story of the Gray Man. And yet, it's the kind of movie where you're supposed to be wondering if the Gray Man is real and, it'll be revealed at some point, or if she's just crazy. And I was never wondering. There was no question. They introduced early on about how she had hurt her children in her sleep and stuff. And I'm like, okay, there we go.
Well, so for me, it was less a question of, is the Gray Man real? And more a question of, is she crazy or is Grifter Drifter still around? Because that was the question. It's like, is she hurting her kids? Did she set the house on fire? Did she do this or did he do that? And we knew he was there. We knew he was a bad guy. So,
yeah.
And like, okay, so the scene where she's outside and she is seeing Brother Wallace.
The Grifter Drifter.
Brother Wallace Grady, the grifter drifter, coming up to her, saying words that her daughter would say, but he's saying them in a very mocking tone. Like he's pretending that he's the daughter, telling her that he's not there. But we also know, like, there's that little snippet right at the beginning of that scene where we see her daughter go out after her. Yeah. And so even I felt a little crazy. I was like, wait, I think that's the daughter. I think she's only seeing him and hearing the daughter, and I think she's about to shoot her daughter in the face. But maybe the twist is that she convinces herself that it's her daughter, but then it turns out it's really him, and he's really mocking her because he knows all of these things. Like, there were a lot of, like, it was like a house of mirrors. Like, there were so many misdirections that I'm like, I don't know which way this movie is going to decide to go.
I never felt that. I 100% was like, okay, that's her delusion, and that's her delusion, and that's her delusion.
Huh.
Like, I mean, obviously, him being a danger and drifting throughout the whole thing was definitely a factor, and it's what made her stop taking her medication. But it never felt like it was anything but her. Although, like you said, when the beds got set on fire and stuff like that, like, it seemed like maybe he was causing problems. But then she was all like, all the doors were locked. He had to seep in through the cracks, like the gray man. I'm like, no, he didn't.
Well, they kept doing shots through this wall that was okay. Early on, they show this gaping hole in the wall at the same time that, like, she's saying something about how, dad's gonna earn more money and bring it back, and we're gonna fix the house, we're gonna finish the house, is how she said it. And I'm like, why did you build the edges of a wall, the chunk of a wall, and not the middle of that wall? Like, how did that happen?
They definitely didn't build that. They busted that. Like, that was, I think maybe they did an addition, and so, like, that was an exterior wall that they smashed through or something. But it's funny to me because I was thinking about it, and I'm like, I feel like because they had the whole, like, finished addition, but between the two was this torn up, classic slats of wood with, like, plaster between them, jagged edges.
Like the Kool-Aid Man had burst through the middle.
They had that. And I'm like, the very first step in building this thing is you put the frame around them. You smooth all that out and put a frame around it.
Okay, but I guess it's not the very first step if your entire goal is that you need more space and a sandstorm is going to come sometime in the next who knows how many days, and you got to close in that space first.
But you know what the fastest way to close that space in is?
Not blow a hole in the wall?
Well, that's the most fastest. The second fastest is you blow the hole in the wall and then you cover the hole.
Well,
and you could do that by putting a door.
Yeah. I don't know. It was weird. But then that meant that they had this, like, creepy hole in the wall that they kept, like, doing shots. I keep saying they kept doing shots, and that makes me think they're, like, drinking alcohol. Yeah. No. The camera kept watching the scene, like, from the other room through this broken wall. Yeah. And so they were talking about, she was talking about how did he get in? And I know she was like, he seeped in under the door because he can turn into dust. I was thinking, is there some way that he's getting in, like through the roof or through some other area that's not secured as well as they think it is? But I mean, it was pretty obvious that she was going crazy, but I don't know. I guess my lack of trust was in how the story was going to be told. Like, I was sort of sitting outside of this, using my writer brain to be like, well, the obvious thing is this. But if I wanted to, like, misdirect people toward the obvious thing, which is she's going crazy, but then spin it at the last minute and have it be that she's not actually crazy, like, that could have happened. And I couldn't tell what these storytellers were going to do.
Yeah, I wasn't feeling that with this movie. I was really feeling the only one solution, and it was bothering me. Normally, movies with this kind of arc to them will start out with a very strong hint that this supernatural creature is hunting them. And it's only much later that you're like, oh, I could see how I could explain that. But in this case, there was really very little of that, and it was mostly just her being crazy.
I think that's why I didn't trust it, because her being crazy was the first thing we were told. And I was like, okay, well, it can't be that. So then what is it going to be? And that's why, like, Esther showed up. Okay, so Esther is the sister or sister-in-law, whichever she is. She also has a kid who is sick. During a storm, one of her kids dies. She, like, shuts down, stops taking care of her other kid. Like, she experiences some of similar things that Margaret experienced. And
she breathes in the gray man.
Exactly. Which I think, you know, is the metaphor for we're living in this desolate, dusty, terrible place and it's driving us all crazy, which is why I called it an environmental disaster movie.
Fair.
But so Esther, like, falls apart. They take her remaining son away because she's not taking care of him. And then she gets better and she shows up at the house and she's like wanting to come in and, you know, do whatever. And I immediately was like, oh, is this what's going to happen? Like, is Esther not better?
Yeah,
is Esther still
concerns.
crazy? And then Esther was clearly and obviously hanging out with Wallace. Or was she? Like, she had the cross that he had in his Bible. But did she?
Oh, is that what that was?
Yes.
I did not know where that had come from.
So Margaret had seen that cross, like, apparently Wallace's mom gave it to him and he kept it. He used it as a bookmark in his Bible. And then Esther is talking about, you know, the healer who showed up at her house and is, you know, made her all better and is going to help everybody. And then she's wearing this cross and Margaret recognizes it. Of course, Margaret also thought that her own daughter was Wallace. So maybe Esther was just wearing some cross that the preacher had given her.
Yeah, it's unclear. That makes me feel better about that because it seemed like, I don't know, there wasn't a good reason for her to go off. She, you know, Esther said, hey, no, his name's Everett Lee instead of Brother Wallace or whatever it is. And Margaret was like screaming at her about how it doesn't matter what he's calling himself. This is who he is. And I'm like, oh, you're completely wrong. It's some other guy. Because they talked about him earlier, that you should go see the healer who lays on hands, who lives in town. And
so maybe it was a completely other guy.
Maybe, but she saw that cross, which again could be delusional, but that kind of explains that scene better because I didn't understand the cross. I didn't know that.
Where I got lost then was, so she thinks that Esther is under the spell of Wallace because she sees her wearing Wallace's cross. Later, we find Esther, Rose, the older of the two living daughters, finds Esther outside with her head split open or like shot. Like, I couldn't tell exactly what had happened, but she was dead and it wasn't the storm that killed her. It was something violent.
It was definitely the earlier shotgun blast.
Oh, that's how. So I think I missed that piece of it because then I was like, Rose immediately is like, you killed Aunt Esther. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, wait. How do we not know that Wallace didn't, like, what?
We do know.
If there was a shotgun blast.
Yeah,
that would help.
Margaret went out in the storm and was like, because, you know, she had heard people banging on the house or whatever, and she was like, couldn't see anything, and she's spinning around with the gun going, oh no, and then she sees Wallace like appear out of the dust, and she shoots him, and he disappears into dust. Mm-hmm. And guess what?
Sure. Okay. Well, I enjoyed, and I was on the ride of, I'm not exactly sure what's happening, but I see what you're saying. Like, I think I was adding my own, like, if I were doing this would be too obvious, so I would have to twist it in some way. So I see what you mean. Like, if you just trust what they're saying, then it's pretty straightforward that she's crazy.
Yeah, I liked, you know, Wallace brings in an element of question, and then Esther also does, because we know that she's messed up, and you only see her one more time alive in the movie, but, you know, she comes to the door and is like, hey, I want to check on you guys, and she seems all totally better, which is scary because, like, Margaret's only opened the door a crack to see her, and I just kept expecting her to open it the rest of the way and have Wallace standing there with his arm around her.
Right.
But none of that happened, but it was all possibilities.
Yeah. Well, one of my notes says gun plus scary person plus mist plus crazy equals question mark. Like, there were a lot of things going into this equation, all of them making things worse.
Well, it's all a big argument for mental health background checks for gun ownership.
Yes.
But speaking of modern ideas, Okay. A whole section of this movie talks about how the gray man, it's something in the horror story they're reading actually says, if you go outside without your mask on, the gray man will seep into your throat and, turn you crazy. And then, later, like the doctor is selling them masks and he's like, oh, you should wear your mask to protect yourself. I'm like, okay, this is a post 2020 movie for sure.
Well, I mean, it is definitely a reminder, sort of like some of the news things and the, essays that we were reading this morning. It's the reminder that we are not in a place we've never been before.
Yeah.
We're in a place that we personally maybe have never been before, but as a society, as a country, we have experienced most of the things we've experienced in the last 4 years at some point or another in the past. Everything is so cyclical.
Yeah.
And like, if you think about, there were probably scientists at the time saying, hey, dust is bad for your lungs.
Yeah.
You should probably cover your mouth if you're going to be outside. Like we do now. People will, we have weather reports that include pollen counts.
Yeah.
And the suggestions that if people are allergic to certain pollens, this is a day when you should stay inside or cover your mouth.
Stay inside, cover all the cracks with cloth.
Yeah, the very idea, which also kind of ties me back to like the Brothers Grimm and like those old fairy tales, which were largely written as stories to scare children into behaving. Like, this is a scary story for children about how if you don't wear your mask, bad things are going to happen because maybe they don't care or they're, they don't want to wear their mask to keep the dust particles out.
Interesting. Not interesting. This movie takes place about 10 years after the Spanish flu. Not that interesting.
Yeah, it's all cyclical. We have been here before and we will be here again. There were some really interesting visual things that were done in this movie. I hesitate to say it was pretty because it was so desolate. It was kind of heartbreaking to watch, but it was hauntingly beautiful, perhaps is the right phrase. Like the colors were all used very carefully and light and dark were all used very carefully. When it was daylight and everything, it was just clear blue sky and everything underneath the blue sky is just this same like parched golden brown color. Yeah. And, like your buildings and everything they're so weathered because they've been beaten by sand and they've been beaten by the heat and the sun and everything looks washed out. Yeah. And I thought that was really interesting. And then when they were inside, there were a lot of shots, especially when all the times she was in the barn, there were all the shots of how like nothing was tightly put together when they built that barn. So like it was very dark, but with all of these like really bright, blindingly bright lines of light coming through between the slats.
Yeah.
The other thing was being inside, and there were several times, I want to say maybe 3 or 4 times, when someone in a very pointed way, like looks into a splash of sunlight and sees the dust motes. Yeah.
There were a lot of digi dust motes, which kind of bothered me. I feel like they could have thrown real dust in there.
Well, I didn't get distracted by them being digital, I guess, because I was just like, oh, the dust motes are the true evil in this movie. And at the same time, the dust doesn't care. Like, dust is not evil. Yeah. But for all of these people, it was. And it was destroying them on physical levels and on emotional levels and on relational levels. Like this completely
eating away.
Yes, this completely lifeless, innocuous thing that has no emotions of like vengeance or evil or anything is destroying them.
Yeah, and that desolation, that was kind of the scariness overlaying the whole movie. I mean, it's supposed to be about this danger to the kids and all, but really it was unsettling to watch, and feel like there's like, they even mentioned the train got derailed by too much dust on the tracks, which sounds stupid, but there's piles of dust in this movie.
I mean, it was sand, really. Like sand. They were calling it dust. It was sand like essentially that part of Oklahoma became like the Sahara Desert. Like there was nothing holding the sand in place.
Yeah. And it just dried up so much, blew away. But that feeling that you can't get stuff and you can't go anywhere. And, their supplies were running out and there was just a little bit of hay left and their cow was dying. And it's just very trapped in this bright sunlight, wide open atmosphere, which I liked that kind of thing, a very intense terror of what are you going to do? At some point, it just all runs out and you just have to wait to die.
Right? And you point out they're trapped in the wide open, which is very interesting to me. And I think is one of those things that is more fearful for us on like an innate level, us as humans on this innate level, because we are a tribal species. Like we have to live together in order to truly survive in an ongoing way. So the idea of being completely alone is possibly more terrifying, like on a really deep, like not thinking brain, but like lizard brain kind of level. The idea of being completely alone and cut off from everyone else, all the other humans, is possibly more scary than the idea of being like kept in a cage with other humans around. Because then at least other humans are potentially bringing you food, like you have the resources that you need. And it doesn't matter how smart you are or how capable you are. If your resources run out and you don't have other humans to rely on, you're dead. That's it. Game over.
It's not just you feeling that way. That's what's behind Margaret's whole descent into madness. She's at the end, she's all talking about how she has to make sure she and her daughters stay together, which includes her dead daughter, and stay together. We can't be separated. We can't be alone. And I guess the writers were thinking the same thing.
I mean, to the extreme that her solution for all of this is that they should all take sleeping pills and go to sleep, and then they can all be with Ada and everything will be fine. And I honestly think she had Rose convinced for half a second. And it wasn't until Rose saw Ollie in the background and was like, oh, right, it's not just me. Because there's also the idea, like, I think Margaret would have given up long ago if it weren't for the fact that she felt like she needed to keep her children alive. So it's, there's so much like, just, what is that? That instinct, that like animal drive that we have of like, she's got this fear of being alone, but she also has this absolute need to protect her children. And all of that is working, like those two internal drives are working against each other in a way that is not sustainable. And then this is not one of those horror movies that's like, and then they defeated the bad guy and everything was okay.
But they did defeat the bad guy, Sully.
So that last scene of Rose and Ollie, okay, I need to come back and talk about what actually happens to Margaret, because it was truly a devastating there was like a devastating second for me in this movie where like that moment I was like, oh, it felt like a gut punch. But jumping ahead a little bit, at the end, the resolution, the denouement of this movie is that Rose and Ollie are finally on the train. They're headed out. We're assuming they're going to find their dad. How?
Because he's at the bridge. He's building a bridge.
Okay. But they're going to go find him, which made me think a whole lot about, that happened a lot. Like people would just head out to California because they knew their uncle had gone out to California. And I'm like, California is a really big place.
I mean, they just go to each town. They're like, have you seen a guy who looks like me?
Right? Like, I'm looking for my Uncle Bob. Like, he's got a scar on his arm. Like, and then people would find other people. Like, that would work. It's bizarre to me. Anyway, they're going to find their dad. And they have this like moment of hope and joy where suddenly Ollie realizes like, we're looking at green. The colors outside are changing because we're getting away from, we're getting out of this trap of isolation, right?
Yeah.
And then Rose sees the dust motes. And I'm like, she has now experienced a level of trauma with this natural disaster that happened that you can't stop, that you can't necessarily know is going to come. And even though she's heading to where her father is, where she's going to feel safe, even though she's around people, even though the grass is turning green. Like everything is getting better. She is carrying the memory, the trauma memory of this dust, of this isolation, of all of this with her. And it's going to be with her forever. She's going to be one of those people who like has to dust her house every single day because like the slightest sign that dust is settling on any of the surfaces is going to send her into a panic. Like that's what I'm thinking. Like how people from the Great Depression like ended up buying 4 copies of everything that they could, you know, like they needed to have stuff around them because they grew up in a time when there was nothing to be had.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, I think so. But to get to that train, Rose and Ollie kind of tricked their mom. Rose was like, hey, let's have our sleeping pills in peaches. Because apparently they have canned peaches. And she was like, that sounds delightful. What a party. And so she's making them the canned peaches. Then Rose is like, hey, Ollie got outside. And that kid is so annoying. And her mom goes running outside to find her. And their whole thing that they do all the time, because there's so many dust storms, is they have rope tied to the door and they go out with the rope so that they can always find their way back. And Rose cuts the rope.
She makes the decision to kill her mother, or to let the storm kill her mother, in order to protect her younger sister.
I mean, to be fair, earlier she was holding a knife and planning to kill her mother with that, but she couldn't do it.
Yes. So, like, she has to make this decision, which I think, again, plays into the fact that now the dust motes are going to follow her. Like, in essence, a little bit, she has inhaled a little bit of the gray man.
Yeah, there's guilt.
So she does this. That was heartbreaking enough, watching her make this decision between her mother and her sister. But the part that just shattered me was Margaret is out there in the storm, fully believing that her younger daughter is lost in the storm and she's trying to save her, and feeling, you know, reliving all the trauma of losing her daughter before, you know, all of these things. She's out there, she's trying to save her daughter. She's a little crazy. So, you know, that's adding to everything. And she's holding on to this rope, which is her lifeline to everything that is keeping her sane. Everything that is real in her life she's connected to with this one piece of twine. And suddenly that piece of twine goes slack.
Yeah.
And she like just keeps pulling it toward herself until she's holding just the end of this cut piece of twine. And she is completely surrounded by the sandstorm. She is finally, truly and utterly cut off from everything. And it was physical, but also I think the thing that really broke me was that it was such a strong metaphor for mental health issues. And when you feel completely, that last thing tethering you to the world getting cut and feeling that like, that's it, I'm lost.
Yeah, and her daughter totally did it to her.
And I think she knew that.
Well, it's interesting. I didn't notice that she got to the end, but yeah, she got to the end and saw that it was cut rather than it just come off. Yikes.
So yeah, that was a really intense moment, both in the movie and just in this like idea of what happens to people when they are disconnected from the world. So it was very powerful. It was very heartbreaking.
I do have to say, I really noticed in that scene, and there were earlier ones where some of the storm business was like not even special effects. It was just they filmed them just in a normal day, and then they just put a filter of gray crap over the screen. And so in that last moment when she's like trapped in the storm and dying, she's not even covering her eyes or nose or mouth. She's just like out there slack-jawed going, what? And like, no, that's not how you are in the middle of a sandstorm.
Yeah.
That bothered me, but it was okay.
That is very true. And honestly, like, she had killed a lot of people by that point. Like, she killed her sister.
Oh,
she killed the sheriff.
But not the deputy.
There was no deputy.
Oh, right.
But yeah, like, she had done some damage. And she was planning to kill her daughters. So, I mean, I was
Good.
I was on board with what her daughter did out of desperation.
I kept thinking how the whole issue is she wasn't taking her sleeping aid, so she wasn't sleeping. And it was like, if they just got her to take one of those pills, then we're all good. But no.
Well, okay, and that also makes me think that's another thing that I think is a fear trigger with people these days, is whether they are someone who needs to take a medication for their mental health or whether they know someone who needs to take medication for their mental health. That trap that you fall into where you need the medication, you start to take the medication, you start to feel better, you start to think you don't need the medication, you stop taking the medication, and then you start getting sick in a way that prevents you from recognizing what it is that's causing you to be sick.
Yep.
Which is a very vicious trap. I have said most of what I needed to say about this movie. I actually thought it was really good. It was one of those very dreary, heartbreaking, devastating horror movies. A lot of emotional darkness.
Yeah.
I thought it was very well done. I enjoyed the acting. And the things that you mentioned, like some of the digital effects and some of those things, like they didn't bother me.
Yeah.
So I am going to give this film 4.5 rehydrated tumbleweeds out of 5.
Okay.
But I am going to say the Grifter Drifter was like, I'm going to save your cow. And he did it by teaching them to put tumbleweeds in water to rehydrate them so the cow could eat them. And literally, I'm like, they live in Oklahoma during the Dust Bowl. No one tried that. No one thought about that. That's not a thing that everyone's doing already.
Yeah.
I was a little disappointed in them. But
I mean, it was new to me, but I don't live in the Dust Bowl, so.
Right. I'm like, this isn't something that we learned way back when this first started. I don't know. Anyway, 4.5 out of 5 rehydrated tumbleweeds, because I really thought it was good, and I would definitely recommend it to other people.
Okay, I too thought it was good, like on all the movie levels. Like it looked really good and it was emotional and powerful, but maybe it's just my thing of how like I felt like it made her look like the villain from the beginning. Not that she was villainous, but you know, what was going on was completely obvious from the beginning, and not in a "ooh, I figured it out" way, but in a just this is what they're showing me. Like they're not even showing anything else, and that kind of put me off to where I'm like, it felt like a waste of time. Like it didn't feel like it was worth watching because in the end it was just what it seemed to be. And that's kind of a false view because, you know, all the imagery and emotions and ideas in there were interesting to watch and that there was something there. But just plot-wise, I felt like that's what was lacking, the plot element. So I will give it 3.5 rehydrated tumbleweeds out of 5. I didn't really enjoy it too much, but I definitely respect that it was it wasn't just like high quality, but it was actually very well done on every level, except I feel like that story was flawed.
Okay. Well, we will leave that there then, and we will be back next time with another movie.
Well, I'll talk to you then. Bye!
Bye!
Oh.
Well, that was some Tokyo drifting around the edge of the couch.
Oh no. She sees the gray man.
What are you doing?
She's such a monster. I can't believe how crazy she looks.